So thanks everyone for coming. So just to let you know what's going to happen, we're in a few minutes' time we'll go into the panel discussion. The panel is on fair and just climate action, so how we can make a difference in the world but not leave anyone behind, and also make the most of opportunities to make the world a better place in other ways. We will have three extra speakers apart from myself this year. We've got Sarah Lunnon, climate campaigner, co-founder of Just Stop Oil, Will Page, a community volunteer from Exeter, and Josie Baker, who's a PhD student looking at heat stress effects, particularly on women and other ways in which there's unequal impacts of climate change. So thanks everyone for coming. And I can see a few familiar faces in the audience. Welcome back. And I have some new ones as well. Thank you very much for joining us. This is our regular climate discussion here at the Rebel Tent, which we have every year. And as I said earlier, the theme this year is fair and just climate action. So how we can make sure that we don't disadvantage anybody when we do what is necessary to deal with climate change. So, I mean, I guess some people here have been coming to Beautiful Days for quite a long time. It's been going since 2002, I think, so nearly 25 years getting on for. In that time, the world has heated by 0.5 degree Celsius while this festival has been going. 0.5 degree doesn't sound like very much, but it's only a couple of degrees. There's a difference between an ice age and not an ice age. So 0.5 degree is quite a lot in the last 25 years. And in fact, since we were last here in this tent in Beautiful Days last year, there's been some pretty major extreme weather events around the world. September last year, just after we were here, the Amazon River was at record low levels. They couldn't get ships up the Amazon to get to the cities in the centre of the region there, so transport networks were reduced. There was water shortages, there was fires and so on, and that was due to a drought which was made worse by climate change. In October last year, in Valencia in Spain, there were catastrophic floods, over 200 people died. January this year, the huge wildfires in Southern California, 20 people died, and hundreds of millions, possibly even to the billions of dollars of damage from property loss and so on. And then this year in the UK, we're now in our 4th heat wave of the year. Alongside that, again, fire is becoming an issue. This year, it doesn't really hit the news that much, but the total burnt area in the UK is 40% above the previous record in 2019 because of the heat and the drought this year. And this really scares me that sooner or later we're going to have a catastrophic fire like we saw in Los Angeles. So, and these things have all been made worse by human-caused climate change. The world is warmer than it was before, and that's because greenhouse gases are building up in the atmosphere, carbon dioxide and methane and so on. Carbon dioxide building up because we are putting it in the atmosphere by burning fossil fuels, coal, oil and gas for energy, transport and so on. Also methane, that's actually a lot of that. Some of it comes from fires, some of it comes from food production, some farming, particularly cattle and so on, also rice. Nitrous oxide is another greenhouse gas, which is an industrial output. We are causing the buildup of these and causing the warming. As you probably know, many of you, the international community has agreed to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees above pre-industrial levels, so above the level of the Industrial Revolution when we started to burn fossil fuels in anger. The idea is to actually try and limit warming to 1.5 degrees above those levels. I said we've warmed by 0.5 degree in the last 20 years. The world has warmed by 1.4 degrees since the Industrial Revolution. So we're almost at this point of 1.5 degrees warming, which is where we get increasingly concerned about these extreme events becoming almost unlivable, and also kicking off potential tipping points in the climate system, like the ongoing melting of glaciers and ice sheets, which is already starting to some extent. Sea levels have already risen by 20 centimetres over the last century. So we really are, more concerned than ever before about the changes that are already happening and the further changes that are locked in already, which we are now going to have to live with, whatever we do. But also, we need to reduce our emissions from fossil fuels and other greenhouse gases to limit the damage even more. So that comes to the kind of climate action. It's a two-pronged attack on climate change, if you like. Reducing emissions doing whatever we can to stop the buildup of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, but also living with the climate change that's already happening and some of which is already locked in. And we're going to talk about all of these today. And both of these issues have it's lots of challenges there. We haven't solved it yet. We know in principle what we need to do. We need to stop burning coal, oil and gas. But in practice, it's very hard. We're so locked into it as a society, and there's dangers of inequalities and unfairness, things being unaffordable and so on. So the challenge is, how do we make sure that people aren't disadvantaged, how we can make it affordable and take practical action. And also there's dangers of in unequal impacts from climate change as well. So vulnerable groups, many people, women, other marginalised communities, there's a racial aspect to this as well. A lot of people are more exposed to climate change than others, than the more privileged groups. So we're going to talk about all these issues now. So we've got three great speakers who will bring their different perspectives on this from all the work they do in relation to climate and other actions. So I'm going to start with Sarah, first of all. If you introduce yourself in more detail and then tell us your initial thoughts. So over to you, Sarah.
Thanks very much. My name's Sarah Lunnon. I was for 15 years a Green Party councillor. I was elected. I took part in the democratic process. After that, I was part of Extinction Rebellion in the political circle, and I then went and wrote a parliamentary bill that went before Parliament. It was started off as the 3 Demands Bill. It became the Climate and Ecology Bill, supported by a huge number of MPs in Parliament. It's not going anywhere. I then went and worked with two of the most prominent direct action campaigns of this century, Insulate Britain and Just Stop Oil. So that's my background. Is the mic working okay?
On and off.
Yeah. How's this? Oh, that sounds better. Great. So I've done various media appearances, and late last year I appeared on the charming Jacob Rees-Mogg's show on GB News. Rees-Mogg turned to me after a brilliant example of cherry picking to demonstrate that everything's fine with regard to the climate, and said words to me of, well, we've passed 1.5 degrees and everything's fine, isn't it? What's so bad? It was a masterclass in the climate discourse of delay. We don't deny it, but it's not so bad. Well, a few months later, the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries, collaborating with Exeter University, published a report which had laid out that our current economic system is effectively bankrupt. The report reads like a Green Party manifesto. The reality that our economic and social activities are actively destroying the very means we need to continue feeding and clothing and housing ourselves is pretty stark. We're bankrupt. And to respond to Rees-Mogg, famously, bankruptcy happens very slowly at first and then very fast. In case you don't know who actuaries are, they're the people in suits who work out whether your life is worth insuring, your life, your business. They deal in risks. And they are telling us that those running the economy and our social security systems and our political systems, they do not understand the risk of ruin that they are taking with every life on our world. We stand to lose all of our human rights, everything. Those scientists, and James Hansen is one of them, who've been proved right time and time again about our heating world, said that we would pass 1.5 in the mid-2020s. 2024 was 1.5 degrees above the pre-industrial average. I asked Richard just before we came on what this year was going to be like. He said, we might be below 1.5, we might just creep over it. Basically, we're there, people. James Hansen no longer sees a way in which we avoid 3 degrees of heating by 2050. It's pretty grim. I'm not a young woman, but I had intended to make it out to 2050. My genes are pretty good on that one, you know. Well, my chances have nosedived. Since it's entirely credible, according to the actuaries, that in a 3-degree world, half the population is killed. At least. Upwards of 4 billion people dead. The mother of all recessions, war, mass death, events in which millions and millions die. Everything humanity has ever built, grown or made was for the stable Holocene, that period of 10,000 years in which farming appeared, cities grew, theatre developed. We've no idea what, if any of it, will survive into the next 100 years. We now live on an unknown world, and we have no idea of what's coming. But remember, this predicament that we're now in, our predicament, it's been planned. Those people running the economic and political systems, they know what is coming. Our politics has been entirely captured by neoliberal capitalism. The system cannot change. Our current electoral politics is not going to provide any of the answers to the human rights issue, the biggest human rights issue that we now face. What I was involved in the past was basically reform. I was asking governments to do things. I was asking them to pass a bill. I was asking them to insulate Britain. I was asking them to stop new oil and gas licenses. It was reformist. Well, I've come to the conclusion that that has to end. What we need now is to rupture our political system. We need to change it entirely. Voting is not going to work for us anymore. It's a popularity contest, and it doesn't work. It's been captured. So what do we do to free ourselves? Well, originally, democracy was not about voting. In Athens, the way that people were chosen to make their rules, well, if you were obviously a free white man, the way that you got chosen, was that you were chosen by lots. They were pulled out of a bucket. The people who would make the decisions was almost entirely random. And those people served for a period of time. We can do that again. These systems exist. They've made decisions in Ireland about abortion, about gay marriage, things that politicians didn't want to touch. And I believe that talking to each other, deliberation, sortition, citizens' assemblies are a way that we can come together and decide how we face what is coming, what we do with our reducing resources. If we care about human rights, if we want to protect humanity, we have to come together and sit down and discuss and deliberate. And I further believe, at this moment, there is actually a sliver of hope. I believe that the Corbyn and Sultana, your party, which has had 800,000 people sign up in a matter of weeks, is astonishing. It is a rupture in our political process. And if they are true to their word about a new democratic process, about a new democracy, I believe we as the grassroots can join that movement and make something very different happen. So we can talk to our neighbours, we can decide, and the people really can hold the power. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Sarah. I realised I completely forgot to properly introduce myself. I'm sorry. So I'm Richard Betts. I'm Head of Climate Impacts Research at the Met Office, just down the road in Exeter, and also Professor at University of Exeter as well. So I'm a climate scientist. I've been working in this for 30 years. I've worked on the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. I led the technical report for the UK's National Climate Change Risk Assessment a couple of years ago. I now sit on the Climate Change Committee, the government's independent advisory body, trying to make them see the urgency of the situation. And I say I've worked in this for 30 years. We've been predicting what's happening now. 30 years ago, we were predicting what is happening now. Actually, we underestimated it, I have to say, in many ways. So, yeah, I could go on more, but I won't take up more time. But that's my background anyway. Great privilege to be sharing this panel with the people actually trying to do something about it. So, Will, over to you.
Okay. Hello, folks. I'm Will Page. I'm a dad, husband, Community volunteer. For the last 20 years, I've worked in the charitable sector. Most recently, I did lots of stuff with cycling, and I campaign around that as well. So, we are living in the middle of an environmental and ecological crisis. The world is heating at an alarming rate, so fast that if we fail to act, our planet could become uninhabitable. You'd think that in the face of such a threat, we'd be united, but we're not. We all want climate action to be done in a way that is fair and equitable, and of course, fairness matters. But here's the problem. When we argue over systems, over fairness, we delay action. A burning world will be an unequal world. Hegel once said, "The only thing we can learn from history is that we learn nothing from history." I was born in 1981. The first big global crisis I can remember was the 2008 financial crash. The wealthy people running our politics, our media, and our banks failed to regulate the American mortgage market or to prepare for a major economic crash leading to a global crisis. What happened next? The failures of our establishment were punished. The people responsible were fined billions. Hundreds of them lost their jobs and went to jail. The media and our financial sectors were all reformed, and our politicians committed to tighter regulation. Of course not. What we got was austerity, and the poorest in our society were made to pay for the mistakes of the rich. Let's choose another recent crisis, COVID-19. The wealthy people running our politics, our media, and our banks failed to properly prepare for or to respond to a global pandemic. This led to at least 3 million deaths globally. What happened next? The people who falsely took millions of pounds of public money to provide faulty PPE were prosecuted. The 100 richest people in the UK paid their fair share as a wealth tax was introduced. The politicians who ignored advice from civil servants were prosecuted and sent to jail. Of course not. What we actually got was another round of austerity. The rich got richer and the poorest were made to pay. Further cuts were made to the public sector. Inequality worsened. Let's take an earlier example, slavery. One of the worst atrocities in the history of humanity. The wealthy people running our politics, our media, and our banks forcibly transported 12 million Africans across the Atlantic Ocean. It was supposedly abolished in the UK in 1833. What happened next? The slaves were freed and given equal status in our society. Every slave received financial compensation. The wealthy individuals who profited gave back their ill-gotten gains and apologised. Of course not. £20 million in compensation was borrowed by the UK and paid, but not to the slaves. It was paid to the slave owners. In today's terms, it would be about £2 billion. We finished paying back the loan in 2015. Slavery still exists around the world. People are still discriminated against on the basis of the colour of their skin. The profits still sit in the bank accounts of the rich. The lesson? When crises hit, the powerful protect themselves, the vulnerable suffer. Climate change will be no different. If we fail to limit warming, who do we think will suffer the consequences? It won't be the rich who lose their homes to floods or struggle with food rationing. It will be the poor, the elderly, the disabled, the vulnerable. Debates the right wing has about the size of the welfare bill will vanish in a world 3 degrees hotter. The question won't be how much support people get, it will be whether they should get anything at all. So here's my point. Those who delay the transition in the name of fairness may end up arming the very people they want to protect. Yes, make adjustments where we can. Yes, pursue equity where possible. But we cannot let the perfect be the enemy of the urgent. I don't care who pays the cost, rich or poor, corporations or governments, it just needs to happen now. This is no longer about fairness, it's about survival. Because the truth is, we're out of time for anything else.
Thank you, Will. Powerful stuff. So, Josie, over to you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Josie Baker. I'm a PhD student at the University of Southampton, and my research is looking at how we build resilience to heat waves in the UK. So as we've already mentioned, we're currently in our 4th heat wave of this year, and we are just going to be experiencing more and more extreme weather events as the climate continues to warm. In 2022, we experienced over 40 degrees in the UK for the first time since records began. And that is just the start. So all of the evidence shows that heat waves are going to become longer, hotter, and more frequent as the climate continues to warm. And particularly in the UK, we are just not prepared for these kind of temperatures. So in 2022, that heat wave caused over 3,000 excess deaths. There was travel disruptions, there was school closures. The whole of society was really impacted. But what we do know from the evidence is that the impacts of these events are not felt equally across society. Age, income, race, gender, employment, housing, they all affect how individuals experience these extreme temperatures, or indeed any kind of extreme weather event. Marginalised groups disproportionately face a higher risk. So I'm particularly interested in women's experience of extreme heat and how they build resilience to heat waves. We know that women face unique and often overlooked challenges during extreme heat events from evidence elsewhere in the globe. So during pregnancy, women can face increased health risks, preterm births, or even miscarriage due to exposure to extreme heat. During menopause, the symptoms can often be exacerbated, and any kind of pre-existing health condition, but particularly with menopause with women. Additional childcare responsibilities when schools close, who's going to be looking after the kids? And we know that we'd love a perfect world where childcare is an equal responsibility, but that is still not the case in the UK. Increased risk of domestic violence and femicide. So there is evidence that when the temperature rises, domestic violence rates increase astronomically. So I could go on for a long list of the different ways that women are adversely impacted by extreme heat, but those are just a few of the most extreme examples, or indeed just minor things like standards of dress and having to maintain modesty whilst the weather is hot, and it annoys me that I can't just take my top off, to be honest. So my research uses literature, media, and people's memories to bridge the gap between a top-down policy and the everyday reality that we see on the ground. And I'm hoping to understand how women experience extreme heat in the UK. We don't actually have any research at the moment on that, and qualitative research where women can just kind of freely talk about their experience, and then also understand how we build resilience to that. And this is this big question of what do we mean by resilience? And we don't really have an answer. There's lots of definitions out there. Does it mean to bounce back when a heat wave happens? Does it mean to actually transform and become something better through the climate crisis? I don't have the answer to that yet. Come back and ask me in a few years. But at the moment, what does resilience look like? And so I'm hoping to go out there and try and find an answer, at least for some of the women in the UK when we need it the most. Thank you.
Thanks, panel, for some great insights to kick us off. So this is going to be mostly a discussion session now. So we've got almost an hour, I think, till just after 1:30, maybe like 22 or something. So I want to open to the audience for any questions, comments that you've got. So there's a hand up here already, actually. So Rob, over here. Thank you.
So far, so good. I agree with everything, but so anthropocentric. We've totally tipped the balance with nature. We are the climate changers, but we're not allowed to talk about our very numbers. And I know that our fertility is coming down, but it isn't going to come down until after 2050, when you're already going to be dead. Nobody's talking about Rees-Mogg's 6 children, Elon Musk's 10 children. Nobody talks about responsible reproduction. Apart from those guys, I'm not pointing the finger at anyone, but we need to educate, empower, advocate for all of us to reproduce in a fair way. It's not fair to have more than a replacement number of kids, but we're not allowed to talk about it. I'm going to get shot down now by someone for being right-wing or pointing my finger at someone, but we're just not allowed to talk about our numbers.
I have some comments on that, but I'll hand over to the others as well. It is quite a complex issue. So my personal view is, in terms of resources, there's enough to go around in the world, and we can live better on the planet as we are. But it's a difficult one. It concerns me when I hear people making the choice not to have any children because of the concern for the future. It really makes me sad. But people make that choice, and that's quite a fair choice. But it makes me very sad when that happens. But I don't know what the answer is. I mean, Sarah, do you want to put your hand up there?
Yeah, it seems very obvious, doesn't it? It's like, like humanity has become a force of nature, and there are so many of us. So the issue is, if we just reduce our numbers, then we'll reduce our impact on the planet. Well, we will reduce our impact on the planet. Like that's the logic behind your question. But the actual truth of who is impacting the planet is not the poor people in India or the poor people in South America. The people impacting the planet are the people in this country who may not have very many children. The impact of everybody in this tent in terms of our responsibility for climate, well, it's not our responsibility. Our impact is hugely greater than the poorer people in this world, the people who mostly have more children. So reducing our numbers is not necessarily the response that's required. What we have to do, and what the system refuses to allow us to do, is to reduce the impact that we are having. And it probably will mean that we become a lot less wealthy in terms of our access to material comforts. It might mean that we actually become more wealthy in terms of community, in terms of neighbourhood, in terms of the way that we socialise. Like we don't have options really, because we're in a pretty grim predicament. There are things we can do to reduce the harm, and it comes back to changing how we change the system that we are currently living under, and it is a systemic harm, and that's what we face. And just reducing our numbers, or just telling people not to have a certain number of children, is not necessarily going to have the impact that you.
It's got to be part of it.
Do anyone else? Do you want to come in?
I agree with Sarah's point of that, of questioning who is having the greatest impact globally. And I understand the concept of your point, and somewhat think it's a fair point, but would worry that the impact of a policy or an initiative like that would be felt mostly by women. And if we had free and open access to contraception all over the globe, I think it would be a different reality of the birth rate anyway. But I also worry about putting the burden of solving this crisis onto women. And I think that the moment we start talking about controlling birth rates, it inevitably does. And I understand that that's not your point, but absolutely. But I think it can so easily be twisted to naturally fall that way. And I think that would be an unfortunate outcome of having discussions like that.
Will, do you want to?
Yeah, I absolutely welcome the question. It's not one I've heard before in terms of you not being allowed to make that point. I've regularly hear that point being made and read about it in newspapers and stuff. So, absolutely welcome that point of view. I'm quite cynical about humanity. I think if we reduce the global population to 1 billion people, I think we'd still have a pretty good crack at destroying the planet. I'm afraid to say that, but that's my view on that. But I know you're not saying that's not the only solution. We've got one child, and one of the factors for that is climate for us. It's definitely something that we thought about. But I think a big driver for a lot of people is economics as well, in terms of the affordability of having more children now. That's something that's a driver for us as well. So, yeah.
So thank you for a great point to start with. It is something that needs discussing because it's such a crucial topic. Thank you. Yes.
Thank Thank you. I have a small garden, which I've let it overgrown. I spend a lot of time in the woods, and I've noticed that my garden creates a microclimate, which is cooler than the air outside. I've noticed that in the dense woodland that I look after, it's much cooler there. I've also read a book called, I think, Rewilding the Sea, and I think Attenborough's talking about this now. But and in that book, he says, if we just left the sea alone, it actually absorb so much carbon dioxide by letting the crustaceans, the whole cycle. If we just took the fishing fleets, 90% of which I think are owned by China, another 5% by Belgium, and the rest of us have got 1%. So could you say something about the natural resilience of the environment to actually help us with the solving the climate crisis?
Yeah, thank you. Great point. So I'll start again, because I do work on some of this at kind of very large, sort of kind of global scales, really. The natural world plays an incredibly important role in buffering us from even worse effects of climate change to some extent. So of our greenhouse gas emissions every year, about half is reabsorbed by land ecosystems and the oceans. One of the big questions that I and my colleagues look at is that going to continue in the future? Climate change should have been twice as much as it has been if it wasn't for this natural ecosystem services of carbon absorption. And on land in particular, we are concerned that will kind of level off and weaken. Some of it is because plants grow better under high levels of carbon dioxide. This is a true fact. It's often used by climate deniers to say, oh yeah, global greening, carbon dioxide is a good thing, it's plant food. Yes, it is, but it's also a greenhouse gas as well. But this plant food effect will start to tail off at high levels of CO2. But also climate change itself will have an impact. And that's one of the reasons I mentioned the Amazon River levels being low last year. Alongside that, there were wildfires both in South America and North America, as I mentioned. That has weakened the natural carbon sinks temporarily, well, hopefully temporarily. But we still need to make the most of these ecosystem services and doing what you're doing with your garden, protecting natural ecosystems and keeping that service going, absorbing carbon, and also helping the microclimate, the evaporation cools the local area. So that's an important part of climate action as well. But it shouldn't be a substitute for cutting emissions, of course. We need to get away from fossil fuels as well as that. So it shouldn't be an excuse. So that's quite a kind of rambling response to your point that yes, at large and small scales, ecosystems are really important. Thank you. Any thoughts on this?
So it's quite a nice story. We tell ourselves, I think, that nature is really, really resilient, and if we can just, stop doing bad things, everything's going to bounce back. I'm not sure that applies anymore. As I said before, we are a force of nature, and we have changed our world so much, to such an extent that it is entirely possible right now that we have triggered a number of tipping points from which we will not be able to go back to the state that we were in before. The Amazon rainforest is one of them. It's entirely possible that the rainforest becomes a savanna, and at that point, the huge amount of moisture that it puts into the air disappears, and that has global implications for farming in various places. We've also heated the ocean so much that it's entirely possible the driver of the Atlantic meridional overturning current stops, at which point the warm waters from the equator that come up and move up into the North Atlantic stop. And surprisingly, one of the impacts for us of climate change is that we get really, really cold. Not forever, but, for our lifetimes. Richard will be able to tell us a couple of 100 years, maybe. But we end up having a climate pretty much like Canada. So if we just stop doing the harm, that's a good thing. But it's not just going to repair itself. It is entirely possible that the tipping points have been crossed. And we're not going to stop doing the harm with the current economic system that we have and the current capture of governments around the world. The harm is going to continue. CO2 emissions are at record levels. It's madness. It's utterly mad. On any reasonable assessment of what needs to be done is not happening. So which is why I come back again to the fact that we need a political and democratic rupture, and I think that is our only hope.
So we just took on an allotment 2 weeks ago, so I'm very excited about some of the things that you're saying. I mean, it's a great thing to do. I think if you can do a little bit of wildlife habitat in your area for nature, then that can only help. But I agree with what Sarah says. The problems are much bigger and far deeper rooted than what we can do in our backyard. But no, good question.
And just from an adaptation perspective, it's one of the best things you can do. If you're lucky enough to have a garden, make the most of the shade. It's fantastic to hear you've already recognised that it's a few degrees cooler underneath the shade, having the breeze come through the garden. But if we are going to be in this warming world, and obviously we want to mitigate that, but if it is going to continue to warm, if you're lucky enough to have access to a garden, it's one of the best things you can do is to have shade in it and give it back to nature.
So none of you have mentioned international politics or international fishing practice. I think 40% of the oceans can affect the carbon.
So you're right, we need to stop industrial fishing, right? Most industrial fishing goes to feed animals for us to consume meat, for humans to consume meat. So these things are all interlinked, and that happens because big companies make lots of money from selling us meat. So how we come together and change our diets is easy to say, oh, we need to change our diets, we need political will, we need to save the oceans. But it's not going to happen in the current system. Nothing is going to change. Like we've just seen the plastics treaty collapse. The idea that any group of logical humans would get together in one room and decide to carry on increasing the amount of plastic we put into the environment is beyond me. How did they do that? Because they're captured. So you're right, we do need to look after the oceans. We do need to stop factory farming. But it's how do we do that? Rather than just crossing our fingers and hoping that people find the political will, how do we manufacture that political will? How do we build systems of power that can make the change happen so the kelp forest can return?
Hey, people.
Hi, my question's about home energy use. And also it's a comment about grassroots community action. So we've been very active in a little Cornish parish called Stoke Climsland, where the whole community has been looking at what they can do individually to reduce the use of home energy. So we're in the process of writing a guide, which is a practical, step-by-step guide. So a homeowner can take it away and read it and actually take one or more items of action which will collectively make a big difference. So I just wanted to invite you to comment about that subject, really.
So that sounds great. I mean, yeah, making stuff happen at the local level is really crucial. Can I ask, if people are trying to move to heat pumps and so on, my perception is that a lot of people want heat pumps, but there's kind of just a shortage of expertise in getting them installed and so on. Are you coming across that? And does your guide include how to actually practically make it happen when there's few people qualified and so on?
Yeah, there's certainly a skill shortage. What we're noticing is that there are organisations who are responding to that. There's an organisation called Heat Geek, for example,
Yes, I know.
who are training the industry. One of the problems is there's a whole army of engineers, gas engineers, who are heading to retirement, and they're not particularly interested in retraining. So I think it's so the work that the colleges are doing in terms of encouraging younger people to come into the profession needs to accelerate. But that's not a reason not to think about a heat pump, because there are things you can do in preparation for a heat pump to make your gas boiler system more efficient, and then you can put a heat pump in at a later date. So it's like everything. You need to start think early about it and find out about it and be curious.
Yes, and this is one issue where there ought to be jobs in this, hadn't there? But there's also sort of some concern about if people are they're trained up in the old systems, they're going to be might be reluctant or might feel they're going to be out-competed or something. So yeah, it's an issue of getting the industry properly and fairly transitioned, isn't it? Other comments from the panel on this? And
So yeah, I've done a little bit of work with Exeter Community Energy in Exeter, who do good work in that area. But I just refer back to, I looked at you, Sarah, refer back to your point. I keep saying I agree with Sarah. The problems, the problems are bigger in terms of our economic system. Again, I mentioned in my speech various crises. Obviously, we had an energy crisis, of which we were told us was a result of the Ukraine-Russia war. And as I kept telling people in the charitable sector, whenever they say there's a cost living crisis, they don't say we have a cost living crisis, we have a greed crisis. That's the problem. And that's why we saw with the energy crisis where, again, the rich got richer and the poor got poorer. And that keeps repeating itself for every issue that we have. And until we change the economic model, then those issues are not going to go away.
Let me go first, then you can ask the question. Okay, community organising, yes, we need to do it. We've absolutely, I think, maybe the one thing we can do to address the crisis we're in is go to a meeting. Because it's like, go and meet some other people who are also interested in this and are also looking for answers. And if your bag is, community energy and insulation, go for it. But remember that it's sitting within this economic system, and ultimately we need to take on the economic and political system. So yes, of course, we need to make people's homes as comfortable as possible to live in. I mean, I think it's crazy that the grants for heat pumps don't apply if it also works as an air conditioning unit. Like, why? So we got a heat pump put in. Can I have one with air conditioning as associated with it? Well, you can, but you won't get the £5,000 grant that the government's offering. So yeah, that's just a little aside. So yes, we need to organise. We need to organise at community level. We need to rediscover that mutual aid actually means us doing stuff and actually getting together and organising. And we need to start thinking about what those structures of power can be. How do we actually do insulation for people who are suffering? How do we actually make their houses ready for heat pumps? And we do that by getting together with other people. So community is where it's at. Oh, sorry. Well, as well as the big scale as well. It's both.
I completely agree, and I was just going to build on that and ask a question back, if that's okay, that you have this fantastic community organisation that you've established, and as we are going to be experiencing more tumultuous and catastrophic weather as a result of climate change, do you feel that this community group, this community action is something that you will be able to rely on now, knowing your neighbour? Is it something that you think will continue to be effective going forward? So once everyone hopefully has insulated their homes and done what they can to reduce their carbon output, will that group continue to prosper going forward to support one another? Can we get a microphone?
Can I just say something? I'm just dropping in a plug for 5 o'clock tomorrow, where we're going to be talking about community assemblies and organising community assemblies in your local areas. And climate change is definitely something that could be an output of that kind of conversation. So come back at 5.
Fantastic. Great. Keep doing it.
I went to see Geoffrey Cox with a bunch of there were 7 women and a few men. We went down to Morrison's 2 weeks ago to see MP Geoffrey Cox regarding the climate and nature bill, and would he support it at private members? And after he was banging about his wonderful farm that he had and blah de blah, and oh yes, I've got a farm, got loads of animals, but I haven't got beavers though. And I said to him, well, surely it's in your best interest and your constituents' interest to go and represent from down here regarding the climate and nature bill. He said to us, he goes, I'm more concerned about a possible war within 10 years' time than the climate. And that that's stunned. He's a Conservative MP. So that just dumbstruck me, because we need food resilience, because down here there's already a lack of food locally. And don't even get me started on food banks, they're brilliant, but we shouldn't need food banks. But you can't even buy food now, and they're trying to tell you to buy food from local farmers, which is really, it's bloody expensive if you're on a low wage or, do you know what I mean, benefits. So that's not for everybody. And then we find out from the Canary that Cox is going to represent some Singapore company, right, and try and open up a coal mine in Cumbria at the taxpayer's expense if he wins. So how can we, do you know what I mean, we talk about community action, but how can we get through to fucking dinosaurs that are in power? Do you know what I mean? How can we get through to them? Because it's just, sorry, rant over.
Go ahead if you want.
So it's such a brilliant example, isn't it, of how our politicians are captured, and how our democratic system is captured. So I don't want to lose democracy, but I think we need to stop voting, because voting for people
just encourages them, right?
Yeah. And it is complicated. We're so in our minds, democracy is voting. So the idea, it's shocking that there is another way of taking part and being democratic. It's a shock. It doesn't really seem to make sense. But we can do it we can do it another way. And I think we have to set those systems up now to be ready for the next election to take them on and to actually change, to take part in the electoral process, but to change it. And so we set those systems up. We set the citizens' assemblies up. We pick candidates in open hustings, primaries like they did in South Devon. So we back a single candidate. We go out and we door knock and we door knock. We use assemblies so that the policies are what are affecting local people. We talk about it in groups, and we decide in groups, and we take the power back. And that is how we take on people like Geoffrey Cox. Because they've got the media, they've got the political power at the moment, the elections, so let's fight them on a different ground. Let's not fight them on their ground. And going out door knocking and organising at community level, they are not there.
So I also say, as well as how the people who are making the decisions are chosen, the ones who are in place now, democracy is not just about who you choose, it's also about how you engage with them when they're when they're in power. I think a lot more can be achieved by trying to engage, not necessarily with MPs, but also at local levels, local councils and so on. You are, okay. So, and often those people are there because they were the ones that were bothered to show up, like yourself, which is great. And you can do a lot by just letting people know that you're concerned about this issue, and if they might be kind of predisposed to sort of make one decision or another. If no one's objecting, then they'll just go along with what they want. So the more people that lend their voices, like Will and myself have been involved in trying to get more active travel in Exeter, more cycling and walking and so on, and there's been some success, there's been some failures as well, but we have found that actually, the local councils have listened to people with good ideas and have taken things forward. So it can make a difference. So democracy is not just about who you choose, it's how you work with the people who are doing it as well, as what I wanted to point out. But yeah, anybody else want to comment?
I absolutely hear your frustration, and I really love the concept of Sarah's point, but as a relatively young person who this kind of late stage capitalist system is the only thing I've ever known, I also struggle to see the vision of something else, and I'm sure that's like a big part of your challenge is kind of helping others to see the vision. My first response, I think, that comes to my head when you ask your question about how do we challenge these dinosaurs is to make our governments and our systems more representative of the people that they serve. And so let's get more women, more people of colour, more disabled people, more gay people, more let's have the vibrancy of our society represented in our government and in our positions of power. And I know that that's not necessarily the solution, and I really love the idea of this big kind of societal change. But even in my lifetime, I've seen more female MPs elected and the government become more diverse. And I think if we can continue to do that, we can hopefully quieten the dinosaur voices more and more and have people who care and represent our thoughts and opinions represent us in Parliament. But that would be my only hope. But it is a wish at the moment.
Okay. So my hope, because I think it's difficult times when you engage with this topic to be optimistic and hopeful. My hope doesn't come from our democratic systems and processes. It comes from our scientists, because I think that they are our best chance of coming up with something, and it's unlikely of coming up with something where we're able to save ourselves from ourselves. I think the reason to organise and to do things like Sarah is outlining is to try to limit the damage as much as possible until the scientists can come up with something. But also secondary one is if and when things do collapse, to have an alternative model that's ready to go. And I think that's the real power in what you're talking about, Sarah.
So Rob, I think there was a question over here. You had a hand up for a while, didn't you, Kat?
Thank you. I wanted to ask because I do agree with a change of the political system, and I do believe that it's necessary because we are seeing the end of kind of capitalism in the Western world at the moment. However, I fear that the change of political system is not going to change the economical substance of the society. And I agree with the lady who was sitting here that the consumerism fuels the ecological catastrophe. And I believe that we need to stop that consumerism, and that is nothing to do with any political system. It is to do with the personal changes we can all make and say no to globalization, try to be more sustainable in how we dress, in what we eat. Would you agree with that? Or do you think we really need to establish a political dictatorship in order to have some meaningful change?
So, but I'd agree with the issue of overconsumption and consumerism, and this links back to the sort of debate about population earlier. You know, we can't afford for everyone to consume as much as the richest in the world do, but if we consume less, there's plenty to go around, is my point out, so I agree on that, yeah. Anybody else?
It's interesting, isn't it? So, I'm so embarrassed, I've forgotten your name, and I'm Josie, I was going to call you Jessie. As Josie said, that she can't imagine a different system other than the neo-capitalist, late-stage capitalist system that she's grown up in. I was born in the 60s, and actually when I was born in the 70s, there was a conversation taking place about different economic systems, and that was actually happening. So there are different ways of living. At the moment, we have a politics and an economic system which is telling us that our basis and our worth is defined by what we buy. And our politics is doing exactly the same thing. All that they talk about is economic growth, GDP. No politician is standing up and having a conversation about what it means to be human. None of them. And that's what we need to do. Thank you. So if we can have a conversation, and if we meet in groups and we talk about what it means to be human, what our responsibilities are at this time, if we have access to experts who are telling us what the real situation is like, I find it very difficult to believe that people are going to say, well, what I really need in my life is the next upgrade of a phone, as opposed to what I really need in my life is a world in which my children can grow up to have children themselves. Once you understand the enormity of our predicament, and you are given options that there are different ways of living, and you are talked to about your human values, which our politicians no longer do and our economic system doesn't do, we can find a way through this. But it requires us to come together and to deliberate and to talk. And that's why we need to do it with other people. Because when we're sat at home on our own, scrolling through our phones, we're lost.
Any other questions? Over here.
Hi, it's not a question so much as just wanted to mention an opportunity that we've got, and I'm standing up so you can all see my T-shirt, because it's my mission at the moment to talk about Rosebank. And I agree with Sarah that we need a political rupture, but I don't agree that there's nothing we can do in the current system. I know we can, and I know that because last year I won a climate court case, which has had a huge impact, and I won a case against a small onshore oil production site in Surrey. But as a result of winning that case in the Supreme Court, the first UK coal mine for decades was stopped. It had been permitted by Michael Gove, and that's the one somebody mentioned. You mentioned Geoffrey Cox wants to bring back. No chance. Also, the Rosebank gigantic oil development in the North Sea, the Jackdaw gas field in the North Sea, whole suite of things all got found to be unlawful because of my court case. And then the entire North Sea production was put on hold for a year while the government came up with a new system of how do you assess whether or not you should allow a new oil field to exist. And they've published that advice at the end of June, and it is actually surprisingly quite good. They've said before any oil field or gas field can be permitted, they have to have a full assessment of the entire climate impact of all of that oil or gas, wherever it's burnt in the world, wherever. They have to look at that against climate targets. They cannot rely on possible future carbon capture and storage. If they're going to say that these emissions will be mitigated, they have to say exactly how much and where, and whether that carbon capture project will directly capture impacts from that oil or gas field, which, as we know, is impossible. It's good advice, and the first time it's going to be applied, very likely with Rosebank, that you've probably heard of. It's a gigantic oil field off Shetland. Its oil would produce more emissions than the 28 poorest countries in the world. When we're talking about justice, it would be a climate disaster. It would be a disaster for other reasons. The owner is Equinor, the main owner, the Norwegian enemy company, but a smaller part of it is owned by Ithaca Energy, which is owned by Delek, an Israeli oil company. So by selling this oil and gas produced in the North Sea, money would flow to Israel and Norway. It needs to be stopped for lots of reasons, and it's going to be incredibly political. Already, different factions in the government are lining up. We know that, so our Energy Minister, Ed Miliband, he said it's a climate disaster, it mustn't go ahead. Yay, Ed. Other people think like that, but there are voices, Rachel Reeve, Keir Starmer, they're very susceptible to listening to what the right wing and corporate want them to say, and they may be arguing that it should be allowed even despite the emissions. So I just think we need to make it a really political issue. The Labour government, they did a U-turn on winter fuel allowances. They are nervous. They're very scared of right-wing voters or, deserting them for reform. They need to be just as nervous about climate voters leaving them for the Greens and the Lib Dems and others. So just a plea to let everyone in this room talk about Rosebank when that application is live, object to it, write to your MPs, write to your newspapers. I believe it could be a tipping point if the government stands to what it said and doesn't allow any new oil and gas. We're the second biggest producer in Europe. We've got huge historic responsibility. I think that could be a tipping point. Other countries are looking at us. We know we need to leave all the oil and gas in the ground, and this is an opportunity to make that case. And I think it's really, really important. Rosebank is a test case. If the government approves it, that is climate denial. But we all collectively have a chance to make that not happen.
Thanks for the advert, and yes, please do take note of that. Any other questions?
Hiya, thanks all. Interested in your views on energy use and water use in big tech data centres and how we interact with people who maybe haven't quite seen the same position as, say, I have and started trying not to use things as much as possible. Interested in your perspectives and how to talk to people about these things.
Yeah, it worries me in many ways, not only the consumption, but also the kind of what it's doing to the way people think. I was in a meeting the other day, we're trying to write some proposal for an event, basically, and colleagues were literally putting stuff into one of the AI software to get ideas for titles. I'm like, don't do that. Let's think ourselves, So, A, we've got brains, and B, you haven't got to ask a machine to do it and use up energy and water and so on. So I think we should raise more awareness of the environmental cost of these things, but also what it's doing to us,
my mic's all over the place. I think it's a huge talking piece that I don't currently think is getting enough attention. I helped to lead seminars on a module called Global Sustainability Challenges, and we did a lecture and a seminar series on AI and sustainability, and we surveyed the students in the lecture theatre. There were over 200 students present, and asked anonymously how many of them had used AI in assignments and regularly use it to help them with their uni work. And bear in mind, these are students who are taking a sustainability module. 84% said they'd used it to help with uni work and assignments. And I was baffled. I'd never used it before, ever. And I went through undergrad and my master's before AI was a thing, so I just didn't realise how big a deal it was. But I think it's a huge issue, and the water usage, the energy consumption, and even the impacts of building these data centres is having an insane impact globally. I can only speak on heat waves because that is my main area of research, but during the 2022 heat wave in the UK, we actually had to shut down one of the data centres because it basically overheated and they could not sufficiently cool it down. And I do think that this is something that we're going to be seeing more frequently as the climate warms, that these data centres simply cannot be sustained. It takes so much energy to cool them during normal temperatures. when we have a heat wave, it's just simply not possible. And then I think maybe if we have more awareness of that, then people might actually, if systems start going down because of the heat wave, people might actually start to take note. But I think it's a conversation we're not really having at the moment, and that's a shame.
Any other thoughts?
AI. I mean, it's really good at taking minutes. She said, guiltily. So, in many ways, although we don't acknowledge it, we're in a rationing situation, right? We have gone past 1.5 degrees, but if we were to have a plan that said, right, we're going to get to 0 carbon in 5 years, it's madness, right? Don't know if we're going to do it or not. Let's go. And we look at the global and the UK economy in terms of how do you do that? How much carbon does each person have? You have a carbon budget. How do you spend that carbon budget? Are you going to spend it on, I don't know, buying chicken, buying beef? Or are you going to spend it on AI? Or I don't know what the future's going to look like. Maybe it might look like you have a certain energy quota because we're going to have to produce our energy from renewables. You can choose how you spend your energy quota. If you grow all your own vegetables, maybe you spend it on using AI. Maybe those are the decisions we're going to have to look at using in the future. Whatever we do, right, whatever happens, our future is going to be very different from our past. The idea that there is just something you can come along and use as much as you like like AI, like anything, it's just gone. Even if you've got the money to do it, you can just use it, that there are no limits. I don't believe that our future, the next 15, 20 years, it's not going to be like that anymore. But what it is like, maybe we can have a hand in making that determination. And that's why this guy's citizens' assemblies is a light. That is a light. And that is the only light I can see at the moment. And maybe AI might have a view on that.
Anything to add, Will? No? Okay, so, yeah, over here. Thanks, Rob.
Hi, thank you all for your presentations. I just wanted to follow up on something that Sarah said towards the end of her starting presentation. And you were talking about your interest and excitement in your party. And I just was interested if you could maybe follow up a bit about the differences you saw between that and other political parties, because and obviously particularly relating to the Green Party, which obviously you do have a lot of experience with, because one thing I'm confused about is because a lot of the things that have been said about it, I find myself thinking, is this really so different from Green Party policies? So I just wondered if you could say a little bit more about that, about your reason for being excited about that. Thank you.
So I am a member of the Green Party. If there are any Green Party members here, I've got a motion going to conference, excellent, and it is to replace the House of Lords with a House of Citizens based on sortition and deliberative democracy. So please go and vote in the prioritisation ballot for the abolish the House of Lords motion. Okay, right, that's that done. I think our way of doing politics has come to an end. So I am a member of the Green Party because at the moment it is the only party that has made a stab at producing the policies that are needed. Right? It's failed on the communication front. We've failed on that, and it's also failed on the mobilisation front. And at the moment in the Green Party, I kind of feel like I'm sitting in my house and I organised a party and nobody came, and I've got the food and the music lined up, and all my mates are across the road. In fact, all my mates are across the road with all of their mates, and they're having a massive party over there, and they're playing all the music I like, and they've got all the food I like, and I'm sitting in my house going, but I organised mine first, and I always do mine on a Friday, and they're all going, hey, come over here, come and join us, we're having a great time. So I think as Greens, we've got to be a little bit careful that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater here. I mean, yes, I wish that 800,000 people had signed up to hear about the Green Party and the Green Party policies, signed up to help organise, signed up to donate, but they haven't done. And 800,000 people have signed up for your party, and they are talking about a new democracy. And people I know and have worked with, people from the Humanity Project, I know have been talking with Corbyn, with Zara Sultana, with some of their close organisers, and I think they are open to this. Like, it's definitely not a done deal, but they are open to it, about doing politics in a very, very different way. And I do find it exciting. And actually, someone sent an email to me this morning saying 2 political parties can endorse one candidate. So who knows what kind of relationship the Green Party could have with your party. But I think we do have an opportunity to do something different and actually have a meaningful democracy that actually addresses our issues.
And of course, so Zara Sultana's here tomorrow, as I'm sure you know. So we've probably got time for maybe one other question over here. Okay.
Oh, hi there. I just wanted to bring it back to the kind of first point I think that Will made and the sort of theme of this session around sort of climate fairness and justice, and your sort of point about positioning it probably provocatively as an either-or. You know, we can do things now or we can do things in a fair and sort of just way. I didn't know if there's something in the sort of opportunities that kind of come with the sort of fairness and justness and kind of broadening the church of, for a bad analogy, but of climate, the climate sort of movement, how it can appeal to a broader section of society and people, how we can get more people involved, Sarah was sort of mentioning, through the changes in the democratic process, but also through the changes in the sort of narrative and vision, and appealing to people with sort of wider backgrounds, like diversity, to create that sort of justice and fairness, and not necessarily seeing them as sort of barriers, but as an opportunity. I didn't know if anyone on the panel had a comment on that.
Sorry, I struggled to pick up the question because the band in the background, the sound. Can you just repeat it again, if you can, a little bit more concisely? Sorry to be a pain.
I guess it's just about any sort of comments on the opportunities that a fair and just climate movement could have, as opposed to potentially the barriers that you sort of provocatively positioned it as well. If things can be done in a fair way, then great. I mean, I'm all in favour of that. To be for very clear, I think just what you see from history is that's not how. Whenever we get a big issue or a big problem, that's not how things are done. I think my message would be to. So, for example, Sarah asked about cycling in Exeter, and we had a low traffic neighbour trial in one of the wards in Hevertree. And it was pulled, and I was having a discussion with a councillor in the Labour Party about that, and they were saying, you couldn't get working class people in a part of the city to give up their cars. They really like their cars. They didn't see any benefit from it. And that's kind of what my point is, that what do you think is going to happen to those working class people if we don't decarbonise, if we don't, 30% of our emissions roughly in Devon come from transport. And so I think whilst I'd love that we have this wonderful world where we all have our allotments and have our solar panels and our heat pumps and we all cycle everywhere and everybody talks over the fence to their neighbours, whilst I would love it to be that way, I think what we're going to get is going to be a really difficult, painful transition process where things are left too late and then we have to pick up the pieces afterwards. So my message is yes to fairness, yes to equity where we can, but we just have to get on with this, because otherwise the people that we're trying to help, the people that we want to benefit, are going to be the ones who suffer the most, whether that's women or disabled people or vulnerable people in any part of our society. Those are the ones who lose that. So the most important thing is that it happens.
It's really funny listening to Will, because 5 5 years ago, I would have said exactly the same thing, like totally. And I've been on a bit of a journey since then. And I've come to the realisation that even if you absolutely know it's the right policy, if you try and enforce it, inflict it on people, you're going to lose. You know. So you actually have to take people with you. Like we absolutely have no option in that. We have to take people with us. And I think we do it by talking about human values. We do it by talking about love. We do it by talking about joy. We do it by talking about people's families. And we do it by asking them what it is they value and what it is they want. Because we are told constantly that people are mean, people are greedy, and people are out to get one over you. But when you sit people round a table together, that is not what happens. I mean, sure, there are some psychopaths out there. I'm not saying there aren't people who will hurt us, but the majority of people are not built like that. We actually care. We care about our families, we care about our communities, we care about our country. And I really think one of the reasons why Reform is doing so well is because they are talking to people's values. And that's why they've been so successful. And it's what we failed to do as Greens, and I think it's pretty much what the Labour Party is failing to do as well.
Josie, any final comments from you?
I very much reiterate the point about going back to people's values. Obviously, in my field of work, I hope that the impacts of climate change are not too inequitable, although they very likely will be. But I do hope that the solution is far more equitable. Personally, I see a huge opportunity, whether it is through grand societal change or through incremental measures, to have this disruptive force make the world a fairer and more equal place. And I think we saw it, a little glimpse of hope of it during COVID. I think people came together and spoke to their neighbour over the fence from a distance, but people did recognise the importance of human connection and how much they missed it when it was taken away from them. And so quickly the lessons from that are lost. I do hope that, although there is great turmoil ahead, and there's no doubt that life is going to get really tough for a lot of people, and unfortunately those people are more likely to be financially less well off, women, persons of minority ethnicities, religions, disabilities. Unfortunately, that is the way that it is going. But hopefully the transformation that we can get out of that is a far more equitable society. And I have to believe that. I haven't got the solutions right now, but I do have to believe that.
And I would say just the process of making it happen is beneficial. It brings us together, I would like to think. I mean, I personally get a lot out of these kind of conversations we're having now, and the stuff we're doing with the cycling campaign, I was saying, with Will and so on, and linking up and working together on this. So the process of trying to make this change in itself, I think, is good for our sort of our mental well-being and our community building as well. So hopefully I can finish on that slightly positive note. I think we need to finish now, so I think we're out of time. So 5 minutes. Okay, so if there's one last question, we should make it quick, and the answer's quick. So no long rambling answers over here. You spoke already, I'm afraid, so we'll go to this guy. Yeah.
Hi, thanks. Obviously, with Reform's narrative pushing against, stop the boats and all that nonsense, just wondering if you could briefly touch on the future and sort of climate migrants, as opposed to, there's not much in the media about that, but I think, if 3 degrees is reached, that's almost a certainty that we're going to have, hundreds of millions of people displaced, and what we do with those people and how we sort of think about their rights and going forward is a really big issue, and it doesn't really get much attention.
Yeah, that's nice, easy one to finish on. I will start by saying that migration shouldn't always be viewed in a negative light. Obviously, there's lots of benefits, people moving around the world and so on. So it's an opportunity as well as a challenge, and also. It's also more complicated than just what the climate is doing and how it's causing migration or being a factor. It's also what people perceive. This has actually been studied quite a lot. People do move around and they cite climate and extreme weather as one of the factors, even if it's not actually changing as much as they think. There might be like one event which is a trigger point. But I think. Yeah, I don't know what the kind of answer is. I'm just adding this for context that yes, I agree, this is something we really need to get a grip on, but there's opportunities as well as threats and challenges there.
Yeah, the great irony with reform is that a party that doesn't believe in net zero policies really doesn't like migrants. It's a bit of a contradiction there as they're about to find out. I mean, my mum's Dutch, so my parents met in Zambia in the 70s with a voluntary service overseas, and my dad persuaded my mum to come back to Barnsley, which is where I was born, so lucky woman. So I guess I'm a product of migration. It's hugely beneficial for society, and I think there is the points we were making about what might happen to temperature in this country. The really rich irony will be is if it becomes very difficult to live in this country and we have to try and go somewhere else.
Not too much to say on this other than migration is a very effective form of adaptation, and ultimately as the mitigation piece is really important, but like I'm on this panel to talk about adaptation and resilience, and ultimately with the climate changing we are going to have to change our lives, and migration is an effective form of adapting to a changing climate. And I think that there may be this transition period. I did see a Guardian article about, I can't remember which island it is, but they're already planning the migration. I don't know if someone in the audience is Tuvalu. But so we're already starting to, like, the first kind of tiptoes into climate migration. As it becomes more commonplace, there is every chance that it actually could be somewhat celebrated as a really effective form of adaptation, of people recognizing the situation around them and actually changing. And I think if we can have the conversation of who is adapting and who isn't, and actually there is a large part of society who are very ignorant and happily ignorant to what's going on around them, if we can actually flip the switch and actually celebrate the people who are aware of what's going on around them and going, actually, congratulations, you're adapting to this changing climate, and that's actually what a lot of us may need to be doing in the future. I don't know how we get there, but I think it is going to be an absolute reality, and I think you're so right. It's a very good point. Anyone else?
So, since the 1970s, I think the UK economy has tripled in size. I'm pretty sure that I'm not 3 times wealthier. Most of that extra wealth has been channeled upward to what's known as the 1%. So the global economy has also grown massively over those 50 years. We have become, the global wealth has increased, but most people have not got richer. So we have a huge amount of wealth and assets globally that we can do stuff with, right? So let's just put that there. Migration is going to become a much bigger issue. Huge parts of the world where people currently live are no longer going to be habitable and will no longer support farming. So the IPC knows this. They actually suggested that half of Africa was going to be on the move by the 2050s. That's just Africa. That's not India or Pakistan or South America or what's going to happen in the States. It is a really big issue. The left don't like talking about it because it's linked to racism, so we just pretend that it's not an issue and hope it goes away. But I think if we can actually, and what happened in Ireland with the most difficult issue in Ireland around abortion and gay marriage was that they held citizens' assemblies on it. Places where people could actually say what they thought and hear from experts about what the situation really was. So if we want to deal with migration and immigration, we are going to have to do it in a different way to our current political system. And we're going to have to recognise that some people have stolen all of our fucking assets and take it back and use that to deal with it.
So on that note, I think we are out of time now, so we'll draw it to a close. And also I can see some on the panel are doing some climate adaptation and trying to deal with heat stress as well. So I think we should relieve the panel from their duties. So thank you very much, everybody, for taking part in the conversation. It's been really fascinating as ever. Please come back next year. And let's thank the panel. Thank you very much.